Yo, what's going on? What's going on? Hey, it's your boy Mad Skills. How y'all doing? All right. What's up? My name is Willie Jefferson. I write about video games for my video game blog, Houstongamer. So it's been really crazy, y'all. The past few weeks, you've had several layoffs at multiple companies, including Sony, EA, Microsoft, among others. You've had closures of studios as well as layoffs like Insomniac Games. They just released Spider-Man 2 on the PlayStation 5. As an old school gamer, it's coming up on 50 years I've been gaming. What I've noticed is there are trends that happen over and over again. You can see where the game industry has had its set of missteps. Now, don't get me wrong, we still have games coming out. They're far and few between AAA ones, but of course you have indie titles. There's an underlying set of reasons why the video game industry is heading for turbulence. So today we're just going to be focusing on part one, which is the industry itself and what factors have contributed to the industry struggling. The first factor is the video game industry has been down this road before. Let's go back to 1983. Some of y'all weren't born or even thought of, but then old timers like me remember it vividly. The biggest kid on the block was Atari 2600, and they also had ColecoVision, Intellivision, and a few others. The problem was oversaturation, poor quality. Game's biggest failure, that is the poster child of the 1983 video game crash, of course, is E.T. E.T. came out, was one of the biggest box office smashes ever. Atari, they were like, hey, we need this game out. We need it out. So they printed up all these copies of the game. You know the story. So what ended up happening? It was buried in New Mexico. That's what's happening today. There are so many titles out there, even AAA games that are just rushed out because the company, shareholders, are like, we need our money. The industry will rush out half-baked games that pretty much are glorified betas. Day one comes, you get your copy. All of a sudden, what does your Xbox Series X, your Series S, if you downloaded it, or your PlayStation 5, or even Nintendo Switch, what does it say? There's an update, required update. Why? Because they released it in an unfinished form. The developers, the publishers are like, hey, we'll get it out in the wild. That'll give us enough lead time so that we can create a patch that will make the game playable. Back when the NES came out, if that game was garbage, there was no way to download a patch for it. What would happen? The game was just trashed. The other contributing factor for the crash of 1983, competition from personal computers. I can remember my dad purchased a Commodore VIC-20, and I remember playing the game Gorf. You could play the same type of games that were on console, but you could play it on a Commodore just like today. Gaming PCs, Macs, Linux boxes, all of those are so powerful today that they would just absolutely blow consoles out of the water.
But can it run Crysis?
Plus, you get a lot of free content on PC that you don't necessarily get via your console. And mods, goodness, the crash was epic. Video games and arcades, hey, they were humming. But as far as the home console market, it was in 1985, and that was the NES, Nintendo Entertainment System. And that is what buoyed the video game industry. Folks, it's happening again. Next, what's contributing to the struggles in the industry? A lack of innovation. Back in the 80s, used to come home, watch GoBots, Transformers, Robotech, Macross, all that cool stuff. Silverhawks, even Mass Crusaders. The one thing I really enjoyed was Robotech. There was a scene in there where Max Sterling, one of the Veritech pilots, was actually in an arcade, and he was playing like a 2D tabletop arcade game against this woman named Mira. Now, The interesting thing is he actually said, hey, let's take it to the next level. He hit a button and the Veritex came off of the tabletop, and there were actually 3D models that were flying all over the arcade. That was back in the 80s. And I was convinced that by the 90s, the end of the 90s, we were going to be there. Not quite. That type of innovation. Developers, publishers, the parent companies are making so much money. They're like, hey, why do we need to update? Why do we need to spend so much money on R&D when we can just release a new Madden that really isn't new? It just has a couple updates. People are going to buy it up. And the industry used all those profits for what? Look at physical media going the way of the dinosaur. What has contributed to the video game industry struggling? The numerous amount of mergers and acquisitions. Whenever there's a merger or an acquisition, what you're going to have is a lot of overlap. They don't need redundancy because that's 2 paychecks. So what they'll do is they're going to initially keep everyone. They're going to start slimming the staff down. Why? Because they're going to be able to save money that way. Buying another company is not cheap. Look at how much Microsoft paid for Activision Blizzard. Whenever there's a merger, you can expect to see massive layoffs. Another contributing factor is chasing trends instead of focusing on innovations. So think for a minute. Think about all these particular items that had these cheap counterfeits. You could think of the Game Boy. As they kept innovating from Game Boy Color to a Game Boy Advance to a Game Boy SP to a DS Lite, you get the story. They just kept innovating. The money that they made, they spent on R&D, they did focus groups, and guess what? They were always killing it. Atari came out with the Lynx, that bombed. Sega came out with the Game Gear. Then Sega came out with the Nomad, but it didn't do so well. And then Sony, they released the PlayStation Portable, PSP, and they also released the PlayStation Vita, but they did not even come close. Another trend, think about it, motion control. This right here changed the way that we look at video games. Why? Because with the Nintendo Wii, you could have an average person that's not really a gamer pick this puppy up, and all of a sudden, wow, it's mimicking my movements on screen.
Oh no!
Really popular, one of the best consoles of all time. Then Sony came out with the PS Move. That didn't do so hot. Microsoft came out with the Kinect. Who asked for this? Instead of chasing trends, say, hey, you know what? We're going to focus on this right here. We're going to own this particular thing. We're going to devote an R&D team to do the research, figure out, hey, is this where we want to go? Instead of chasing trends, be trendsetters. That's what we had back in the day. Another contributing factor with publishers phasing out physical media. My question is, you don't have to print a disc or make a cartridge. You don't have to ship it. You don't have to pay for packaging on millions of units. That's saving you millions, if not billions of dollars. What in the world are these publishers and companies doing with the profits? I know that they had them on their spreadsheet. They are budgeted. What did they do with the proceeds? Poor mismanagement. Instead of counting their chickens before they hatch, why not use it to fund new IPs? Look at existing games that may be in development limbo. Hire temp workers to come in and help get a game polished so that when it hits, it doesn't need a day one patch. Another contributing factor, leaning so heavily on live service games. Publishers and developers are not Rockstar Games. Rockstar has a solid game plan for live service models. You realize how much money they're making on the same product. Now others are like, ooh, let's do that. Back to chasing trends. You hear about studios closing and cancellation of live service games? Why? Because live service takes experts. If you make a good enough game to start off with, they're going to come back. Leave the live service games to experts or lure the experts away to your team. Another contributing factor, the video game industry decided one extra Bentley or Bugatti in your driveway, you needed two. So what happens? You jack the price up to $70 so that you can bring it down to $59.99 and say, oh, look, you're getting a bargain. Consumers are tired of it. Also, having sequels to games that didn't do really well. Who asked for this? We want good games. We want games that aren't going to be $70, that are half-baked, that come out needing day one patches. Like DJ Khaled said, another one. We consumers have to hold the industry accountable for their actions. These are a few of the reasons that have contributed to the game industry going through the grief that it's going through right now. And it will only get worse if video game makers, developers don't think about what consumers really want and what they're willing to just pay up for. This is an informed look at why the video game industry as a whole is suffering the way it is. It is Willie Jefferson. Thank you so much for watching my videos. If you enjoy these videos, please enable alerts for my channel so that you won't miss whenever any of the newer videos go online. Plus, if you like this video, please share, please subscribe, and
smash
the like button. If you need to get in touch with me, you can hit me up on my social media links. All that's below. And thank you once again for watching. Talk to y'all later. It's your boy Skills. Deuces.